We will defend these police officers.
Listen to police officers' commands, listen to what we tell you, and just stop. The nation needs to realize that when we tell you to do something, do it. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, then the courts will figure it out.
We don't get to take the law, we enforce it. But at the end of the day, each and every member should go home safe. Sometimes the use of force is necessary. You need to comply with the police officer, the way the system was meant to be. Comply with the orders of police officers. Resisting arrest is a real and dangerous crime.
Nonpartisan Liberty for All. I'm your host, Dave Bourne, and it is January 7th, 2016, and I'm coming to you live from Las Vegas, Nevada. Thank you for listening to Nonpartisan Liberty for All. We're on weeknights, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, and you can listen on Spreaker.com and NonpartisanLibertyForAll.com for all the live shows. And to get the archives, you can get all the archives on Spreaker, and you can get the archives as of about last week on YouTube, Twitter, SoundCloud, and Tumblr as well, or Tumble. There might be two different ones. One's Tumblr and Tumble, or I don't know. It might be the same one. It was a little weird, the site, but it's another site that I can post, or it automatically posts the show to. Also Facebook as well. We promote the ideas of true freedom and liberty, meaning being able to do whatever you want as long as you respect the freedom of others and don't directly interfere with their freedom, as well as exposing government for what it is, a mafia based on extortion that rules without consent by threat of force and violence. So today we're going to be talking all about, are we really just slaves to the system? Slaves to corporations and the government, which is almost one and the same at this point. And I would say that we pretty much are, at least for the most part. There are people that control the system, and of course they're not, but the majority, the 99%, or maybe not that high, because I would say that if you have enough money where you don't have to live in a big mansion or anything like that, but where you don't have to work, then you're not really a slave of the system in that sense. But you are in another sense when it comes to all the laws and how if the government wants to go after you, they can. So there's kind of two different things going on there, where being a slave to the system in that you have to go to work every day, you have to obey your bosses, or they can essentially ruin your life, or cause it a big inconvenience. And then there is where you have enough money where you don't have to work, but the government can still go after you. And then there's those people that are pretty much untouchable at the top there. So we're going to get into those topics and more. Before we get into those, though, I have a couple other things that I wanted to talk about. So out of the Kansas City paper, I don't know what it, the Kansas City something, I don't know, kansascity.com, but they were talking about, because of the militia in Oregon, they're talking about our militias coming back, and that there's been an increase. Part of that being because of Obama, but they also mention, and they're always going to do this, the racist aspect, and they did mention that, and they mention the Confederate flag. Now, to me, to be honest, the Confederate flag doesn't really mean shit. I know you had a show that made the Confederate flag huge in the 80s, the Dukes of Hazzard, and I even had the car. It's just a fucking flag. Bottom line is the Civil War was not about slavery. That's what separated the states, I think, for the most part. But it was about getting the Union back. And Lincoln would say the same thing. That's what he did say, that it was about, you can't leave. You're part of this union of states. And we're not letting you go anywhere, which in a way is even worse. But the war itself, even though slavery was probably, you'd consider it the cause. I mean, if it wasn't for slavery, would that have happened? Probably not. But it's possible. I mean, there were a lot of other things going on where the South was a lot different than the North and the rest of the country. I guess Midwest, depending, where that line was. I think it was right below Virginia or above Virginia, and then went, across there. So, and I think the last straw was that I remember Kansas came into the Union, and because every new state, they wanted, they were free states and slave states, and they were trying to keep them even. So in the Senate, they had an even amount of senators. So in theory, I mean, that was not the cause of the Civil War. However, it was, well, it may have been the cause, but that wasn't the reason for it, I guess, or other way around. I guess it depends how you want to put it. But bottom line is that it was about bringing the states back. It wasn't about slavery, but slavery definitely had a lot to do with it. But the president didn't say, hey, we're going to go into these states, and which that's what they should have done way before that, is say, abolish slavery and go into those places and free the people and say, hey, look, you guys want to fucking leave. That's your prerogative if you want to leave the Union, because you as a state have a right to leave the Union, but we're not going to allow states that border us to have people as slaves. So we're going to come in and fight you over it. And that may, in general, I'm against war, and it's not really something I ever thought about, but that to me may have been the way to actually go years before the Civil War, was to go in and say, we're going to attack these states. Well, not actually even attack them, but go to everywhere that has slaves and free them. But it was about keeping the Union together. Anyway, what I see them doing already, of course, and they did this with states' rights, and any state that wants to secede, they always went back to the Civil War, because not wanting to be, this is where, and this really fucking pisses me off, because this is where they being mostly either government operatives or one of the parties, basically people that are part of either the government or party operatives, that they have an agenda and they do things to push their agenda. So what they'll do is, like Sharpton, like douchebags like that, will come out and say secession is racist because look at secession during the Civil War in the states that seceded from the Union. And they've done that and talked about that as well. So that's kind of what they're doing here to an extent. Like, oh, these anti-government militias, they're of course racist because there were ones in the 90s and most of them, or a lot of them, were racist. Not all of them were, but there were a certain amount. And I know from someone that was actually in the militia movement and came on the show where he had described himself as not a racist, but somebody who fell into, he was anti-government, and for whatever reason, you had these neo-Nazis that were anti-government as well. But the difference was that he was anti-government, no government. They were anti the way the government was now and wanted to implement their own, Nazi government. So he had kind of fallen in with that based on them being anti-government. But in his mind, it was like, well, I'm not racist, but there's nobody else here that is getting involved in this fight. So anyway, they're talking about the militias and them coming back and increasing the, I don't think they ever went anywhere. They just decreased. But them increasing the amount of militias out there, which I don't have a problem with. I mean, the bottom line is, and I talked about this yesterday, that you have the right, in my opinion, to defend yourself. So these militias, that's what they're doing. Now, what they're going to do to demonize them is throw in, like they threw in the flag. And even that, where there was years and years where nobody said anything about it. See, this is what I don't get. And it wasn't years where no one said anything because nobody could speak out. We're not talking about the 1960s, but people in the 80s could have spoke out about it, and maybe they did, and I just don't recall because I was young. But I don't recall anybody speaking out about the flag back then, and it's just a fucking stupid flag. I don't know. I understand to an extent, but anyways, that's not what this is about. That was just something they mentioned, because of the flag. So that's another reason why there's militias. I think that's kind of bullshit, that there's militias because of the flag. Now, militias because of Obama taking guns and wanting to start. Now, I know everyone has their whole thing. Well, he's not taking guns. He's just doing this or doing that or whatever. But that's where it starts. And we see how the government starts with one thing and says, oh, we're never going to do this. And I mean, there's thousands of examples. I could go through and find a whole bunch of them if I wanted to, where the government said, no, we're not going to do this. And they did it. And they do it all the time. So that whole thing where, oh, well, we don't want to take your guns. We just want to do this. It's bullshit. And we know it's bullshit. And I'll come out and say, which I have before, is I'm totally against all that shit either way. I'm not just against it because I think it's going to lead to somewhere else. I'm against it because I don't think the government has any rights stopping you from possessing anything or doing any background checks on you for anything. So fuck him, because that's how I feel about it. So for me, it's not about it's because it could lead to this. It's about you don't have any right to do that. Who the fuck are you? Just because, and I keep going back to the government, like, where does the government get its power from? And anybody that says that, oh, we all agreed to blah, blah, blah. Like, no, we did not. Nobody was alive. And I have to keep catching my breath because I'm a little sick today. So my voice isn't as good as usual, and I don't have as much breath there. But it's crazy because where do they get their authority from? It's not from the people. It's funny when I hear people say, well, people own or control or run the government, or, yeah, people do, but they're the people that work for the fucking government, not the people that just happen to live in the same area where the government is. And they do whatever they want. People don't have any say. So that's a bunch of bullshit. But they're already trying to demonize militias, that they're racist and all of this shit. And that's what they have been trying to do with anything anti-government. Anything anti-government is racist. They've been doing it on that fucking station on Sirius for a long time now, where they put out there that anybody that is quote unquote anti-government is a racist. So then they can throw everyone in this one little box and say that they're all anti-government and that they're all racist and tie them together. It's like trying to tie me to some neo-Nazi fuck, which in reality we are totally different, but look for the common thing, which, okay, he's anti-government, say, and I'm anti-government, but we are totally different on every fucking possible issue, even on the anti-government thing, because he would be somebody who wanted to take over the government and install his bullshit Nazi government, National Socialism, if he even knows what it is. And I just want the government to leave me alone and to not have a government or to have rulers. So we'll see where this goes, but I definitely see the media doing the same thing and pushing this whole thing up as they have, and or pushing this whole thing towards racism as they have for a while now. And it was legitimately in the 90s, there was a lot of racism in it and a lot of racist elements. So that is true. But that doesn't mean that, well, now anybody that's considered anti-government or is in a militia feels the same way, because a lot's happened in 20 years. So I think it's hard to really compare militias of today to back then. And again, I don't think there's anything wrong with having a militia. I think more are needed. I think, again, if you have a military that's that big and that's that powerful, I mean, they could take over the fucking actual U.S. government, the federal government. And where's the checks and balances? I had said when I did a show on checks and balances that the real checks and balances that should exist is the people should have enough weapons as the police. And there you go. There's your check and balance. If the police get out of hand, they know that, okay, people are armed, which just the idea in itself helps to keep them in line. You don't necessarily have to do anything to keep them in line. And what I would say is you have checks and balances that way. And then when a cop, murders somebody and shoots them in the back and you got it on videotape, then you go take care of that cop. There you go. Then how many cops in that town are going to go and shoot somebody in the back again? Probably none. Think about that for a second. So here's a scenario. So say in Las Vegas you had we won't call them a militia, but we'll call them a group of freedom fighters or whatever you want to call them. I don't know. That sounded better in my head, I guess, than in reality. But so they're the checks and balance as far as the government and passing. See, this would only really be on a local level, but it would be the police executing the laws, really, is what it would be. It wouldn't be on the passing of the laws. It would be on the execution. So that would be a check, and these people would make sure they check it at the police level. So if the police executed laws that they weren't supposed to, that's where you'd have an issue. Or if you had the police just murder somebody and you had it on video, say all police were wearing cams and they actually didn't turn them off when people murdered people. I'm giving a perfect example, like perfect where nothing goes wrong. And you have clearly, you see the whole video, the cop just murdered a kid and shot him in the back. Then you have the freedom people or whatever you want to call them. They go and they take care of that cop and nobody ever sees them again. Now, you're going to tell me that the cops in that town, what are they going to do? You think they're going to go shoot somebody in the back again? Now, they could try to be hard asses and try to go after that group. But if that group is just as armed as the police, why do that? Because it's going to be suicide for both sides. So it's, okay, maybe we shouldn't do that again. Maybe we shouldn't just kill innocent people. And that would be the outcome there. Those are the checks and balances I actually believe in. Now, not in murder. I'm not a big fan of that. And as I had said before, I value people's lives, and I think that's the last thing. And to do it for revenge is not a valid reason. And in that circumstance, it wouldn't be for revenge. It would be, you'd have to show everybody, look, this is, it would be for punishment. But I'm not saying that I totally approve of that whole thing. I'm just using that as an example that would, deterrence would be the other thing. But that would be my type of check and balance. Having a group of armed people who have nothing to do with the government that can stand up for the people of the city that you live in and make sure that people's rights are not violated. So that, as I said, though, there's a couple things that it wouldn't do. Is it wouldn't stop the lawmakers from making laws, although they know that if they did, they'd learn that, okay, if we make these laws, the results aren't going to be good anyway, so maybe don't do that. But when you have federal laws, you're talking about the whole country, so that would only be if you had something like that set up throughout the whole country. But there should be. And that's the whole thing. It can't be connected to the government whatsoever. That's the problem that people don't see, that whether you have internal affairs or whether you have this branch and supposedly watching this branch, you know, the three branches of government where we had talked about checks and balances, that if they're all under government, it doesn't make a difference. It's the people themselves. And if the people supposedly run the fucking government, obviously they don't, then what is the problem there? And that's why that clip with Larkin Rose is so funny. That was based on a Larkin Rose speech where not funny, but it tells so much and explains it in a really good way. That, oh, well, you have to ask permission from the people, from these people, even though you're in control of these people. It's ridiculous. It makes no sense. So the reason I wanted to bring up the militias again is because just watch and how you'll see them going into the racism aspect. And that these militias are racist. And I'm not going to say that nobody in a militia, you know, there's individuals. They're all individuals. So I'm not going to say that nobody in a militia is racist, because I'm sure there are. And again, that depends how you define racism, because a lot of people are just throwing that word around. And that's not good, because the way I see it getting thrown around is not what it means in reality. Racism has to do, in my opinion, with hate. It has to do with hate, and also hate that you can actually act on and do something about. Now, anybody can act on hate and go and shoot another person or something along those lines. So that is dangerous, but that rarely happens. It does happen, but not too much. The other thing is if you run a business or something like that. But most of these guys that are racist, they have no power to do anything anyway. They sit in their fucking house and, you know, maybe they yell shit at their TV and they're just fucking losers. The danger is when you have government that's racist, when you have police that are racist, or you have judges or any legislators or any part of government, prosecutors. And that's where I see racism the most, is in the injustice system. Now, they seem to be going after everybody, but I do see a lot of racism there, and I definitely think it's a racist institution as well. But hey, if the police can't get a black person, they're happy with white people too. As long as they can beat somebody up and, you know, arrest them for nothing, or, you know, any of those things, they're happy with them. So don't think that they're not. 702-470-7664 is the number if you would like to call in. And you can also Skype in at Nonpartisan Liberty for All is the contact name. Send a contact request with your name, where you're calling from, and a brief message about what you want to talk about. So I had a couple other stories that kind of are related in a way, and not really, but sort of. So one of them has to do with gay marriage. And I want to preface this and say that I, of course, support gay marriage. I support freedom and liberty. If somebody wants to marry someone of the same sex, I don't care. Like, it's, and I don't understand why people do, in all seriousness, like, and what they call it. if they call it marriage or if they call it whatever. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't affect me. It's, if that's what makes them happy, fine. I don't really give a fuck. And I know that I have gay friends. Right now, I'm trying to think. I have more probably bisexual friends than gay friends or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I don't really ask people like if they're bisexual. But speaking of that, in the Yahoo, there was an article that says women in the U.S. 3 times more likely to say they're bisexual. So I guess in a poll, and that's say it. Now, is it that it's the same and that men are scared to say it because it's more socially acceptable? So for women, and you still have that shit where you have women say how hard it is and whatever. I'm sorry. It's hard for me to buy that at this time because there are so many women that are bi and guys don't give a fuck. First of all, maybe it's being, it's the difference between just being gay and bi. Like, guys are fine with bi girls, but if they're totally lesbian, then they're not. I don't know. I mean, again, I don't care either way for when it comes to people in general. For myself, it's different, where I wouldn't date a girl that's bi or obviously lesbian. And the bi part would be because I'd be worried about her leaving me for another girl, or that I'm not satisfying her enough or something like that. So those would be my own insecurities. And I've dated girls before that were bi. So, and that probably caused some of that. So, but is it that guys just aren't being honest when they, and I guess the poll was 18 to 44, and 5.5% of women said they're bisexual, and I'm trying to find where it says the men, because it says in the 2006 to 2010, 3.9% of women and 1.2% of men. But where does it say men now? 6.2% of men said they had experienced sexual contact with another man. Okay. So they're just talking about people that I guess either would do something or have done something, I assume, with someone of the same sex. See, I honestly tend to say that it is probably a little higher because, one, women, here's one big difference that's not attractive to women for the most part. That most women do not find two guys together attractive. And most men do find two women together attractive. So, like, I don't even want to watch, and I'm not a big porn person, but the limited porn that I did have, that I downloaded a couple little short videos like years ago, it was all girls. Because what do I need a guy in my porn for? So seriously, and I know I talk to other people. I don't really talk about sex that much with people. I mean, that's really my business. But I heard someone say before that they picture themselves as the guy. Okay, I guess that, works. I don't know. I just like seeing I'd rather see two girls. But there is something to be said about the fact, and this is going to come off weird probably, but that guys are just disgusting, man. Like, guys are hairy, and a lot of guys don't take care of themselves, like hygiene and all of that shit. And women are just, not all women, because there's some disgusting women, but women are just beautiful in so many different aspects. I don't know. And of course, I'm attracted to women, but so I understand how women can be attracted to other women, I guess. But I think that there honestly is a difference, that there are less bisexual guys than bisexual women because of that women are just so much more beautiful, and I can't explain what I mean, which sucks when you're on the radio and you can't explain what you mean. But being that women are, like they'd say when you're a kid, the sugar and spice and everything nice and all that shit. And a lot of times that's not true, unfortunately. But that part of it, that the just total how beautiful and the how women smell and how they dress and just how that beauty just kind of radiates for a good-looking woman. I'm not saying for all women. So I would tend to say that, to be honest, I don't think it is even. I really don't. I think that less men are attracted to other men because men are just nasty. If you look at it, like, I don't understand how women are attracted to men. I mean, so, well, that's just me, but I think part of it, as far as how I see it now, people that are bisexual would probably tell me something totally different and say that, well, whatever. And I don't see it. I definitely see how a woman could be attracted to another woman. Now, there definitely is it's more acceptable for a woman to be bisexual than a man. And again, a big part of that, I think, is the fact that men find it attractive to see two women together, but most women do not find it attractive to see two men together because there is no kind of, I guess it's the manliness part, where a woman, this is just based on things that girls have said to me, where, a woman doesn't want to see a man like act like a woman or something, or be in a woman-like position. I'm getting too, I think, graphic in this, but that's essentially what I think. And it's weird. It's probably, if you ask women when their first bisexual experience happened, and women were being honest, it seems like girls go to college. Now it might be even, younger, but it used to be, and I think even going back, years and years ago, like, before people even talked about it, like maybe 40, 50 years ago, that it was college. It was like it's late at night and their roommates are drinking and then they start kissing each other or something. I don't know. I never lived at college, but that's where at least people, if you look at, I would say that's actually an example, I think, of government media. And I don't think there's any reason why, but if you look at all these movies, that's where girls will say they first hooked up in college. So, I'm trying to think girls that I know that aren't lesbians but hooked up with a girl before, and I think they said in college as well. So there may be some truth to that. So the other article I wanted to talk about kind of relates to that in the sense of it's in Alabama. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court issues an order blocking all gay marriages in the state. And I guess part of that is because that there's different courts with different rulings, and that in the state's constitution it bans same-sex marriage, but that's a violation of the Supreme Court ruling. But he had wrote in his ruling in June that it had caused confusion and uncertainty among Alabama probate judges due to the conflict between the state and the federal rulings. And that's why I kind of started off with, I don't care about gay marriage. However, one of the things that has bothered me, and this is why I left the ACLU, one of the reasons, is the main reason I left the ACLU was because they don't support a right to own a gun. They support a collective right because it says militia. And the other thing, the ACLU will not stop bothering you. I think I left like 2 years ago. I get emails from them like once a week. They are just hardcore, man. If you leave them, like, you can't leave. They're like the mafia or something. They will just, except they won't hurt you, but they will just keep fucking emailing you. And they might call me too. I don't answer numbers that I don't know. So they may be calling me too. But for one, they didn't help me when I got fucking, ripped out of my car and got huge bruises all over me. And you can see all those bruises if you go to nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. You could see all those bruises there on the pics page. And when I say bruises, I mean they're fucking huge. And I sent them this letter, and I had also told them, all the details of how I was on private property and I wasn't even doing anything, and they had no right to ask me to get out of my car and all of that stuff. And they just, ignored me. I understand that they have limited resources, but, they obviously have time to fucking contact me about giving them more money. But I didn't know at the time when I joined them that they didn't support the Second Amendment, but they don't. So fuck them. But anyway, when I look at gay marriage, here's looking at it in a, I guess, honest sense that really makes it meaningless when it comes down to this. It's just about being stupid on both sides. So I'll explain what I mean by that. So in some states, you have the domestic partner that has all the same rights. So if you can get all the same rights, because that's really the main thing, you can get all the same rights. The only difference is they're not calling it marriage. And really, who gives a fuck what the government, recognizes or doesn't recognize anyway? I don't give a fuck if they call when I get married, if they call it marriage or not, as long as I have those same rights. And I think you could even get those through a lawyer too, but that will probably cost more money, so it's not fair. So I support it being the same, and it being, I don't support the state being involved in marriage, but if they're going to be, it should be the same. If you're gay, it's called marriage. If you're not gay, it's called marriage. Fine. But once a state gets to a point where gay people have all the same rights in a domestic partnership, like everything, that they don't have to do anything different to get those rights, I understand they want to call it gay marriage, and they want to be able to call it marriage just like anybody else. And I think the other side is being ridiculous, where we can't call it marriage. It's just fucking stupid because of religious bullshit. But I think on both sides, now I would lean more to the side of the gay people, because they're the ones who, should be able to call it marriage. But why even waste any time on that if you're the ACLU? Seriously, in all honesty, once it gets to that point, if I'm in the ACLU, I'm sitting there like, there's fucking, the government is spying on people. We have whistleblowers going to jail. We have all of these fucking things going on, and you have the same rights. You just don't get the name at the moment. Why would I want to waste my resources on that? Now, if they don't have the same rights, that's one thing. But that's another reason, too, why I left them, because they were focusing, it seemed like all their time was on things like gay marriage and making sure that every state, had it actually called gay marriage. And again, don't get me wrong, I don't have anything against gay people, and I'm fine with them calling it gay marriage, and it doesn't bother me at all. And I understand why they want it to be called marriage. But as far as the resources and allocating resources, once they have those rights, I would allocate those resources someplace else because of how fucked up things are. So, and that's, I don't know. So I almost have it's not backlash, but it's kind of like what I've seen, and people have talked about this as well, as it's kind of, I'm trying to think of how to word it without offending anybody, because I'm not trying to offend anybody, but that it's just and I understand gay people have been discriminated against, gay people have been, beat up and stuff like that, and that's terrible, and people have no right to do that. But it's like the pushing of, I wouldn't say pushing of gayness on people, but just the putting it as a higher issue than others that are, I think, more important. And I know to gay people, obviously, that's an important issue, but is it more important to be able to get married or to have the freedom where the police can't just come in your house or take your guns away? Or now, of course, the ACLU doesn't give a fuck if the police can come in and take your guns away, so that doesn't matter. But I definitely have seen a kind of push where more gay characters, more gay on TV, more gayness in the media. And it doesn't bother me, but especially since I don't watch regular TV anyway. But I mean, if there's a gay character on a show, it doesn't bother me. But I really don't want to watch an all gay show. Now, that doesn't mean I don't think it shouldn't exist, because if they can find enough people to watch it, I think that's fine. There was like some show that my fiance was watching that was all guys, and they're like making out and stuff. And I'm sorry, I don't think there's anything wrong with not wanting to see that, because it just doesn't not that I'm offended, because I'm not offended, but you know, I really don't want to see two guys like making out or something, or anything like that. Now, if they just like kiss, whatever, like a little kiss or something, that's fine. And they have just as much as a right to public displays of affection as male and female couples as well. But it's like we've gotten to a point where if you're not all the way over here when it comes to accepting gayness, then you're homophobe or something. And I think that's where there's occasionally backlash on that, I think. And I don't know that I'm really explained what I mean all that well, especially with the being a little sick today. but yeah, and again, in no way do I have anything against gay people, or, you know, they have just as much of a right to be happy as anybody else does. I don't think there's anything wrong with them. If they're entitled to have gay characters and gay shows and gay role models just like everybody else does. But it seems like, I guess it's more that they want everybody to be accepting. But if anybody has any issue, they aren't as accepting of it. And I guess I understand that to a point. But like if I say, well, yeah, I don't want to watch a gay show because I don't want to watch gay guys, you know, touch each other. Like, I'm talking about like the Showtime HBO shows. Now, I would gladly watch a lesbian show because, you know, that turns me on to see the girls together, but the gay show doesn't. So really what I'm saying is that it's about rights, and I'll stick up for, I support anybody's rights no matter who they are, and that everybody deserves the same rights. So they deserve gay marriage just as much as heterosexual marriage. But again, if I'm looking at my priorities, and this is not a case of that, but that's where I saw all the focus go. And it's like saying that if the government was going to kill people and you're out there trying to defend the gay marriage over trying to stop the government from killing people, you might be dead and not be able to get married anyway. So shouldn't that be a higher importance, I guess? So that, I think, is my main point there. But But I could look at it on the other side as well and say, you guys are ridiculous. You're just, I mean, this is a waste of time when we could be focusing on other issues, but you fuckers get caught up on the marriage. And I'm talking about the other side of it, the people who don't want to call it marriage. That, oh, well, gay people, I've heard this so many times from conservatives. Well, gay people can, you know, they can have civil unions and all the same rights. They just can't call it marriage. And that's where it's so stupid as well. So it's like, okay, let's waste all this time. And it creates a big distraction, because if they would just say, okay, fine, they can call it marriage, and there you go, they have resolved that issue. Gay marriage is legal there, and it's over. But because of things like that, and these are the type of issues that politicians like, because they get people caught up in this bullshit. It's an issue that gets people to vote for them somehow. And it's an issue that, in the big scheme of things, really isn't that important. I know it's important to gay people, but when I say it's not that important, it's not going to be the downfall of the country or something, or it's not going to be an issue that destroys the economy or your job or ability to buy a house or something like that. So, and there's a lot of issues like that. Abortion is one of them, I think, too, where they, you know, fight over it. And of course, I believe in abortion. I think that if you have something in your body, that you can take it out anytime you want. And the whole thing is that they get caught up on these issues, which that to me is very, very important on one side. On the other side, I don't think it is. On the people that are against abortion, where like they really give a fuck. I don't think they do. I'm sorry. And most of these people are also the same ones that want to send people to war. So it's time that's wasted on things that really there's no need to, if ignorant people didn't make it into something stupid, like I said, like the, you know, saying, oh, you can't call it, you can have everything, but you just can't call it marriage, because that offends me. And the people who are really fucked up is the people that say it offends the sanctity of my marriage. What does what somebody else calls their relationship have to do with yours? If you feel that way, then you got a serious fucking problem. So anyway, I happened to see those two articles and they kind of related together, I guess. So I thought I'd kind of just bring them all together. But anyway, I'm going to take a quick break. If you'd like to call in, again, 702-470-7664, 702-470-7664. I apologize for, my voice being a little off here, and it's starting to get to my head a little, but I'll try to do the best show that I can. And if you'd like to Skype in, contact Nonpartisan Liberty for all one word, and send a contact request, your name, where you're calling from, what you want to talk about. And we will be right back after I figure out. I knew what I was going to play too. Oh, okay. When I was talking about it earlier, the how they try to lump people into a group and everybody's racist, and from Sirius Radio, I played it a lot actually, but I haven't played it recently. So this is from probably like a year ago, and the host agrees with this guy who calls in, who sounds like, because he called in all the time. I used to listen to these shows because basically I would get the progressive agenda just from listening to the show, and it was some scary shit. And basically, it's where I think they wanted the country to go, meaning Obama and all the progressives. But they had this guy called in like this was a planned out thing, and he calls in all the time and essentially takes Republicans and then everybody else who's anti-government and throws them in there with them. And what it does is it makes it easier for them to attack, because they say, yeah, the anti-government people, and then they say the anti-government people are all these different groups of people. Basically, anybody who's not a progressive is in there, and they're all racist, and they're all this, and they're all that. And it's pretty fucked up. So I'm going to play that and probably play something else. And then we will be right back, and we'll probably get into the main topic of the night. And we'll start talking about how essentially most of us are just slaves. So we'll be right back. nonpartisanlibertyforall.com, and check out the website if you haven't checked it out. The more traffic, the better for me. I'm going to continue to try to build it up. Right now, I'm going through my SEO stuff, but I'm also going to add I have a few original articles, but do more of a blog / original article thing, so I can try to get something up there every day. So there will be some new content for people. So, and try to expand the very small empire. We're still looking for shows as well, new original shows. I still have a couple shows that I could play right now that are on other stations that I talk to the people that do them, and they're fine with that. So at some point I'm going to do that as well. I just haven't got to it, but I wanted to have an original show before I started doing that, as the other one did not work out at all. So hopefully we will find another show. And again, I want to do a show about Las Vegas, essentially what I'm doing, but something that focuses on Las Vegas, because I think that would be not only appealing to people here in Las Vegas, but also to people around the country, because it is Las Vegas and everybody knows the city of Las Vegas. And I think that it would be more exciting than just some other regular city, because it is a vacation spot and people want to know about it and what's going on. And so, and there's some more interesting stories. Other than that, it's just a city like every place else, but it would definitely, I think, attract people to want to hear about Vegas. So anyway, we'll be right back after this. nonpartisanlibertyforall.com.
866-997-4748. Tim in Detroit, you're on the Michelangelo Signorelli Show.
Oh, hi, Michelangelo. I've been following the Bundy case a little bit. The problem is that we're not just talking about civil disobedience. It's not that, it's actually sedition. And let me try to illustrate this. In the 1960s, the great civil rights movement was very active throughout the United States, and it went to other countries too. Their objective was obviously to reform, not overthrow the government of the United States. And their means of trying to do that was nonviolent resistance. People might picket lunch counters, they might do marches, things like that. It was nonviolent. There was no, in fact, the whole philosophy of the civil rights movement was explicitly nonviolent, as stated by Dr. King, who was inspired by people like Gandhi. So now we move to today. And you have to understand that this Mr. Bundy traces his lineage back to these right-wing. They're not really militias either. Look, a militia something that's formed by a state government or national government. These aren't militias, Michael. They're terrorist bands. Let's call them what they are. If these were Islamic groups doing what they're doing under the U.S. Code of Law, they'd be called terrorist groups. We simply don't call them terrorist groups because they're white. Let's not kid ourselves here. This is why I believe the Obama administration backed down, because it does not want it to be seen as engaged in anti-white violence. I think it's hypocritical. Mr. Bundy is a terrorist. He should be treated according to the laws of terrorism we have.
Well, I get your point, and look, I think the federal government has every right to go in there and take this land, and I'm hoping they will. Do you agree with Donna Brazil's point that, April 19th was the Timothy McVeigh anniversary. It was also the anniversary of Columbine. It has all of this right-wing, it was Hitler's birthday or something. I mean, it has all of this right-wing weight to it, and you want to show that you're not exacerbating the situation. The last thing you want is for them to be able to turn this into something that they can grow bigger because the government looks strong-armed, right? Like it was going too far.
But Mike, they've been with us now for 20 or more years. We've had the survivalists. You can go tracing back to the 70s. You've had the KKK. White terrorism has been with us for decades, if not centuries. You've had lynchings. You've had violence. I think we as on the left do ourselves a disservice by not highlighting the terrorist nature of what I call white.
I agree with you completely. And I would say it's right-wing terrorism. That is what it should be called. And they should be... I'm sick of... Look at the guy who just attacked these people and killed these people because he was anti-Semitic. It's right-wing terrorism. And people got mad at using the term right-wing terrorism. These people are all in the same groups. They're anti-government.
We know they took over in fascist Spain. They took over in Nazi Germany. A lot of the Latin American regimes that, by the way, people like Ronald Reagan supported were right-wing. This is a fascist movement. This isn't a bunch of guys who decided to go to a lark, at this guy's ranch. I mean, they have an agenda. They want to create a United States where gay people, black people, disabled people, people of color will be subordinate, if not eliminated. And we have to say that out in the open. These guys are terrorists by any definition. Now you can say, well, what about the philosophical value of fascism versus liberalism? Well, fine, but this is not an academic discussion. If we take terrorism seriously, these guys are terrorists and should be treated as terrorists.
I agree with you. And people run from the idea that it's terrorism. The media runs from it, when it's an anti-abortion attack, when a doctor is killed, when it is a racial minority or a religious minority. We saw what happened at the Sikh temple. We saw what happened with the attack on these people who weren't even Jewish. He believed they were Jewish. We see it every day with attacks on African Americans. We saw it with the Minutemen at the border attacking immigrants and killing people. And the media never uses the word terrorism.
Michael, I know you have other callers, but you have to understand a lot of this stuff, too, goes back to corporations. Wherever you have a lot of capitalism, and you can find this even in Weimar Germany, capitalism seems to, in a sense, condone right-wing extremism, and this is why. Capitalism is interested in pretty much making a profit, okay? This forms sort of a class-based society. But in that class-based society, you have groups, obviously, that feel disenfranchised.
The reason, and sorry for the quality, I really think that this was totally planned out is because you look how, and I call it free markets. I don't call it capitalism because the definition of capitalism has been bastardized just like all these other words like anarchist and libertarian and whatever. But he turns this anti-government thing after labeling anybody who's anti-government and saying that, they're racist and they're part of this whole thing, and then turns it into, an anti-capitalism thing. So it's just like, there was definitely an agenda there. And that guy, when I was listening to that show, and again, I wasn't listening because I supported their ideas. I was listening because I wanted to hear what bullshit they put out there. And it totally sounded like a planned call there. But you have the host agreeing with him on everything. And I was like, when I first heard that, and they called Cliven Bundy a racist before, I got to point this out as well. This was before he had come out and made the comments that he did. And if you actually listen to the whole video, it's put more in context, not to say that he wasn't ignorant in what he said, but there was no hate in what he said and nothing like that. He was just being kind of ignorant. He was actually saying that we want black people here, we want Mexican people here, but in the way that he said it, it came off really, it sounded racist and sounded ignorant. But if you look at the whole, the video from beginning to end, it shows that he just was ignorant, not necessarily racist. But of course they don't do that. They just played a little clip from it. But I just wanted to mention that as well. And it has gotten to a point, and not that everybody is aware of this about me. I did a show about it, but it was on Christmas Eve. But I've mentioned it here or there, that when I was in high school, that I experienced a lot of racism. I used to hang around with all black kids. I had braids in my hair, and I experienced it on both sides, more from white people, though. So I'm not somebody who is, just I guess run of the mill white person or whatever. So for me, I think that when I say something, it has a little more validity than the average white person saying something when it comes to racism. And that's, not always, because I don't know what they've experienced neither, but meaning that, I fought and stood up for racism against black people. And when I say some of the things that I say now, and I still, would stand up against racism, but for me, it's more about whatever is the cause and going after the cause. So like I've said before, the stop and frisk, that then what I want to do is get rid of the police, or stop the police from stopping and frisking people, not make sure that it's even, that the amount of white people are the same as the amount of black people. That's just stupid. So, and that's what it sounds like the government wants to do. But I'm not going to sit there and just because I come from a certain background, not be honest about things. It's just like, I'm sure there's some black people that, because they don't want to come off as being anti-black, or not that they'd be anti-black being black, but as whatever, they don't say things because they don't want to be labeled certain things. So a lot of people, I think, fall into that, and that's a problem, on both sides probably. So for me, I don't feel any affiliation with any race. I don't feel anything for any race at all. So I just tell it like it is and what I believe. And you have people on that are parts of any race that will not do that because of that allegiance to their race, instead of just really telling what they think and what really went on. And I think that's sad that people won't do that they won't be honest about things. So let me play the rest of this.
Even if they're not. Okay, and briefly, corporations want to create a certain, how can I put this, resentment. I mean, for example, Hitler used this against the Jews. Okay, and what he did is he took Germans in the capitalist system who were not doing well, and he scapegoated the Jews. You see this in other societies. You see this obviously in the United States, where many whites are not doing well under this system, and therefore are
well, we certainly see how politicians then scapegoat other groups and drive these people to these extremist groups, for sure. Listen, thank you for the comments today, Tim. 866.
Many people believe low voter turnout is a problem. As a solution, some advocate mandatory voting. There are mandatory voting laws in other countries, like Australia, which require citizens to vote or face a fine or punishment. Are these laws a good idea? I would say no. Here's one reason why. For over 50 years, political scientists have continually found that most citizens are badly informed. For instance, most cannot identify incumbents. If things are going well, they don't know whom to thank. If things are going badly, they don't know whom to blame. Yet, ignorance isn't even the main problem. Citizens appear to make systematic mistakes about the most basic issues in economics, political science, and sociology. While you can force someone to vote, you can't force them to know a lot about an issue. The typical citizen would fail Econ 101. Do we really want to force him or her to make a choice about economic policy? The typical citizen systematically overestimates the benefits of war and underestimates the human and material costs. Do we really want to force him or her to choose between the hawkish and dovish candidates? When political scientists and economists study political knowledge, they find that the citizens who abstain from voting are typically even more ignorant or misinformed than the citizens who do vote. If we force everyone to vote, the net result is that we get a more misinformed pool of voters. We would then get political candidates who reflect voters' misperceptions. We then get bad public policy. That's not likely to be in the electorate's advantage or to the advantage of the most vulnerable members of society. A common objection to my argument is that voter turnout isn't uniformly low among all groups. The disadvantaged, poor, unemployed, and uneducated are much less likely to vote than the advantaged, rich, employed, and educated. So, the argument is that maybe we should force the disadvantaged to vote in order to make sure that the better off don't take advantage of them or ignore their interests. But this objection relies upon a false assumption. It assumes people vote primarily for their self-interest. Now, you're going to find this hard to believe, but when political scientists study voting behavior, they find over and over again that people do not vote selfishly. Political scientists themselves have had a hard time accepting this, and that's why they've done so many studies. Instead, they find that voters tend to vote for what they believe to be the national interest. So we don't need to worry about protecting non-voters from selfish voters. People mean well. They don't want to exploit their neighbors. What we should worry about instead is that people do not invest the time to learn which policies really serve the common good. Forcing people to vote doesn't fix this problem. Elections are high stakes. If we make bad decisions at the voting booth, we contribute to bad government, needless wars, homophobic, sexist, and racist legislation, lost prosperity, and more. All citizens should have an equal right to vote, but if someone wants to abstain from voting because he doesn't feel he knows the right answers, or for any other reason, he should be allowed to do so.
And we are back. That was pretty, that's a pretty fucked up thing that in some countries, and I knew this, and I think Canada's one of them, they actually force you to vote. Like it fucking matters anyway. But that's insane. You think about it, then you're forced to vote for somebody that you can't stand or you don't like, or you got to face a fine from the government. And really, I think they want to force people to vote if for any reason, so the person that won the election can say that, well, this amount of people, the majority of the people, or this amount of people wanted me to be in charge. And which is such bullshit. It's no, they put two candidates in front of you and you were forced to vote, and you were just basically, you got more votes over this specific person. And with Obama and with everybody, it's not just him, it's the people that actually decided to vote. It's not even, he didn't even get the majority of people in the U.S. Like, more people didn't vote for him than did. So essentially, the amount of votes he got was based on the amount of registered voters that decided to vote for him. So he doesn't even have the majority of the U.S. I don't know how much more it is than what he has, but I remember looking at it one day and breaking it down, and it was a lot more. For some reason, the number 174 is in my head. Now, that might have been the amount of registered voters or something like that, but that sounds kind of too high. But because I figured out there's a bunch of different numbers. So you have, first of all, eligible voters, right? And that would be anybody over 18 that's not a felon, depending on the state. Because in some states, I think felons can vote, which is fucked up. That so you get your rights taken away for the rest of your life because you committed what they called a felony. And a lot of felonies are like ridiculous crimes in the first place anyway. But so you have that number of eligible voters, and then you have, out of those eligible voters, people that actually voted, and then out of the people that actually voted, you have the people that voted for him. So I just know that there's like double the amount of people, and I would count anybody 12 and older, to be honest, as people that what they say matters. This whole 18 shit, man. And I know it's, well, then we'd have to convince these kids and they'd vote for somebody else, and we wouldn't have to do all the work we do in rigging our elections. But it's not hard for them anyway, because really, as long as they get it down to two people that they don't care if it goes one way or the other, that's all they need to do with the president. They really just need to, and it's pretty easy to do that with the primaries and them focusing on that. So really all they need to do is get who they want to win each primary, and they're good. But I think they are even able to go to getting the specific person to win, and they probably know within a certain percentage of how many votes they're going to win by. So when we did a show on Trump and Sanders, and I like to kind of stay away from shit like that, but my co-host Shire Dude wanted to do a show on it, and I had things, you know, to say about it, and I want to make sure that, you know, he had the opportunity to contribute to the show as well. So I'm like, okay, if you really want to do it, that's fine. We can do that. I have enough stuff to say about it. And it really doesn't matter, because you can look at it and say, well, what if he gets in and, does, based on what he's saying, does this or does that. And it's, you know what, if he gets in, that's not what he's going to do, because he's going to be controlled. And if he doesn't do what the powers that be want him to do, something's going to happen. Whether it's his daughter ends up dead or something like that. And I'm not even kidding that these people are, and I'm sure they're informed of all that neither. It's not just like a handshake, we trust you to do what we need you to do. And then, of course, there's a whole bunch of shit that I'm sure they don't give a fuck about. I mean, you look at some of these bills, they're just like, name this park after this fallen soldier, or there's bills like that all the time. So shit like that, they don't really give a fuck, but they being the powers that be. But when it comes down to the important stuff, and I think with guns, that they've gotten to the point, they being, the people that secretly run everything, that they've gotten to the point where they want them gone, that they're ready to move forward with some things. And that's why Obama is pushing these executive orders at this point. And they want to make sure that whoever gets in there is not only going to leave those executive orders as is, but they're also going to push for a bill out of Congress. So anybody who's saying that they're going to get rid of those executive orders, they're either not going to get elected or they're not going to do it. But that's, again, based on the idea that that's what the powers that be want. And that's just speculation. I don't know what they really want. I know they want the public disarmed, but it's just a matter of when do they want the public disarmed. Maybe they want the public armed up until there's some kind of small war with a militia and they're able to wipe out a bunch of people. Because if they don't have guns, then it will be harder to wipe them out. And that sounds weird because it's like, well, if they have guns, won't it be harder to wipe them out? Well, what I mean is if they don't have any guns and they just go and murder them, then that illusion of freedom goes more and more away. And I think it's going to get to a point where, and it seems to be getting there, that they won't care about the illusion of freedom. And once it gets to that point, then we're in trouble. So now you still have, one, not all the infrastructure, I think, set up, and two, that they still care to an extent, although it's a small extent, about the illusion of freedom. And then they know that most of the people, the majority of people don't go around looking up declassified documents and all this stuff anyway. So they don't really care about that shit because it's, even though it's in the document and people like me might go and read them, I'm a very small percentage that actually goes and looks at stuff like that. So anyway, the main thing I wanted to talk about tonight is the slave, I guess, not slave mentality, but how we are all essentially slaves controlled by the government and corporations. So slaves controlled by the system. Now, I know some people might get insulted and say, well, no, in the 1800s, those were slaves. yes, they were slaves on a totally different level. So there's a difference. They were slaves in the sense of, take the difference between Hitler and whoever the U.S. president is. And I'm saying, of course, right now it's Obama, but, it's not going to be Obama next year. So whoever the president is, it really doesn't matter. And it doesn't. It's fucked up, but it doesn't matter. I'm thinking of this like on Howard Stern. They used to play this lady. It doesn't matter. So it doesn't really matter. So that you have that difference where Hitler came out and you knew finally he got to a point where he was a dictator. He murdered people. He was doing all this stuff and everybody knew and they were scared of him and whatever. That would be the equivalent of what I'm talking about with slaves in the 1800s. And then you have how things are now with whoever's in as president and how there's an illusion of freedom and people now. So it's totally different, but in a way it's not. We just have a much bigger plantation to run around on, and we think that we have freedom. They knew they didn't have freedom. They knew they were slaves, well, most of them, because they were told and they were controlled more. And as I've said before, it's better to have somebody as a slave when they don't know they're a slave. And it's better to have someone not know that they're not free and let them think they're free. Because that's when you can do so much more and get away with so much more. As opposed to when you know you're a slave or you know you have a dictator controlling you, you're going to have a lot more people that are going to be trying to fight back and trying to challenge you. If tomorrow the president came out as a dictator, and pretty much that's what he's doing, but people, it's been built up in their heads so much that they're not going to think of it that way. But he came out as a dictator and said, there's no more Congress. I run everything. Now, in a way, I'm scared to really know what people would actually do. Because who knows how many people would do anything. I bet you there's a certain amount of people that would be cheering because they would sit there and say, well, now he can get, this done and that done and all of this shit done and not have to have Congress in the way like he's been saying. But in general, that's how it would work is, then people would realize, okay, we're run by a dictator and more people would try to fight back instead of just do nothing. So I don't know if that's the best analogy, but I think it's a pretty good analogy comparing, the slaves that were slaves in the 1800s and before that, and the slaves of today. Because we're not slaves in the same way. But you have this life that is portrayed on TV, reinforced at school, and reinforced by your family and politicians of the life you're supposed to have because it's best for government. So the life that's best for government is you have a wife, you have kids, you have a job, you get a house with a white picket fence and, that whole, what they call the American dream, which is a bunch of bullshit. But that way, it makes it a lot harder for you to stand up because you have things to lose. You have kids, you have a wife, you have mortgage payments. And it's different than when you were a kid. And you notice, like, there's probably a lot of people. I'm somebody who hasn't really changed much, to be honest. I, for a little while, kind of fell into that corporate thing, like, yeah, I'm going to do this and whatever. And then I was like, no. And I do, work at a corporation and everything. But I mean, as far as that being, I don't want to say anything that's going to like make me look bad to my job or anything, but just, it kind of being my life and that whole, wanting to be the corporate man and all that bullshit. But, and that probably has held me back too, to be honest. But when you have all of these things, like when you're a kid, you don't really have anything to hold you back. So, there's threat of being arrested and they're really trying to build that up in kids now with police and schools and stuff like that. But you don't have all these responsibilities. You don't have, I guess a good analogy is love, right? So when you're a kid, you can have a relationship with anybody and fall in love with anybody. And I don't mean that you just fall in love with anybody, but what I mean is that you don't think about where you're going to live and what you would do and how you would support yourselves and stuff like that. It's just because your feelings for that person. And it's just all based upon that. It's all based upon your feelings for that person and that just being in love feeling. And all the other stuff don't matter because they don't have to yet. And then as you get older, then it gets more complicated because maybe one person wants to go to school in one state and the other wants to go to stay where they are locally. And maybe as you get older, someone wants to live in one place and somebody wants to live in another place, or they want to live differently where they make a lot of money and spend a lot of money and the other person doesn't really care about money. So there's all these things that come up. And I think what happens with people is they get deeper and deeper into slavery because as they pile on all these responsibilities, they can't do, at least they think they can't, but they sit there and say, well, I can't do this. I have kids. I have a wife, assuming that they, care about them and love them. And I'm obviously taking it from the guy's point of view, but we could, take it from the girl's point of view as well. Same thing, I have a job where I need to help support the family. So all of these things that you are trapped within this system, because there was a statistic, something like 60% of people can't come up with $1,000, like if they needed it for an emergency. That's pretty sad. And I don't know if that's because you have some people that just blow their money and don't save any of it, but you have a lot of people that live check to check And what happens is, each week, whatever money they bring in, all of it goes out. So they can't really come up with that money. Maybe if they need to, they could borrow it or something, or put it on a credit card or something like that. But they couldn't come up with the cash for it. So, and you look at businesses, everything's going corporate, essentially. And corporations pretty much dictate a lot of things to government or vice versa. But it benefits the government to have everything corporate. Because then you have, it's the same thing the federal government is doing, basically. Or what would we call it when we brought everything into the corporate office? I worked for a company where we were bringing everything that was out in the field into the corporate office. Centralization. So we'd centralize everything in the corporate office because it made more sense at the time for the company to have everything, centralized there than to be at each site. So that's what had happened. And, of course, people got mad and most people didn't transfer. A few people did, but most people just, said, all right, whatever, and got a job someplace else instead of centralizing stuff. So the federal government, it's the same thing. They want to control as much as possible up in Washington. And the less corporations, the less they have to deal with it. Or the less companies they have to deal with. So you think about it, if they had 5 major corporations that controlled the whole country, they only got to deal with the heads of those 5 corporations. And they can get pretty much whatever they want from those corporations, as opposed to if you have, 1 million companies, then that makes it kind of hard for the government to control everything. So working for a corporation is also a lot different than, I think, a smaller business. And most small businesses are out of business except for maybe the internet. I know a lot of stuff you can do online. And that's probably, when you think of small businesses, it's got to be the biggest employer of small businesses, or the biggest type of small business. Like, you don't see they may still exist in some places, but I don't at least see any department stores that are independent, that maybe the owner owns like 2 of them, and that's it. They have 2 department stores, because Walmart has pretty much pushed everybody out except for a couple other corporations that still remain, that may not remain that much longer neither, like Target. And I don't know how far Target goes, if they're just in the West right now or if they're still all over the country. And I don't know what happened with Kmart, but that's pretty much, as far as department stores that I know of, that's pretty much it. The one business I think, though, that you do find a lot of independent ones is like bars and restaurants. You'll find a lot of bars and restaurants that are independent, but that's about it. If you think of where you go grocery shopping, think of, I mean, there are some independent, grocery stores, but not a lot. Or where you go to the pharmacy, or where you go to, I don't know, buy toys or clothes, or they're all, when I think of these things, they're all corporations. They're all franchises. Well, it doesn't mean this necessarily franchise. It's either the way corporations are set up, or it's either a franchise, which they pay franchise fees and you own that specific one, or it's all corporate, which means the corporation owns all of them and runs all of them. But so it benefits government more. It benefits us, the people, less, because we don't have the option to go to all these different companies. You only have a couple options. And they essentially have almost a monopoly or a small group for most industries. And what happens is, if you work for a corporation, or even if you work for a small business, I guess it doesn't matter, but more people, I think, work for corporations now. It's like they control your life. Because if you get fired, and as I said earlier, it's something like 60% of people don't even have $1,000 that they could get out of savings. So what happens if you get fired? Well, you'll get unemployment, but depending on, it's nothing compared to if you make good money, it's nothing compared to that. So they have a certain control over your life. Then you have the banks and the credit cards and the credit card companies. And almost everybody has a credit card, and they use it when they shouldn't. They, get the balance up there high. I've gone through this too. So, and then you're in debt. And then maybe you're just making the minimum payments. But if you lose your job, then, they might come around to try to collect, not actually come around, but, call, whatever, send stuff in the mail or whatnot to collect some of the money because you haven't paid them. So I think from when you're younger that this is kind of the life that you're taught that you're supposed to live, that you're supposed to live this life of, like I said, a house and wife or husband and kids and job and go to college if you can and all of these things, whether you get something out of them or not. So you may be someone who would be happy just riding a motorcycle all over the country and doing odd jobs as you drive through to, pay for a motel room every night and, little things here and there, food and stuff that you need. Or you may be somebody who wants to do something else completely different. I can't think of an example, so I'm not going to give one. And at the same time, of course, you're being extorted by the government how is that not being a slave? So that in itself is one of the biggest, if you're looking at, well, okay, based on everything I just said, how is a person a slave? Well, one of the biggest things is you're working for the government and you don't even know it. Well, you know it, but you don't. You don't think of it that way. When someone asks you, who do you work for? You don't say the government. And actually, I don't know that would be, I'm trying to think how that would be, because they don't pay you, you pay them. So aren't they supposed to be working for you? But see, that's where it's a fucked up relationship, because you are working for them, but you're also paying them at the same time. So you're paying them essentially for nothing. Now, there may be some benefits you get from the government. I can't think of one. I know roads. The roads. Essentially, gas tax is supposed to pay for roads. So that has nothing to do with and that's not even enough. They want to tax your car and they want to tax the mileage you drive and put that on your car, put a GPS on your car, track the mileage you drive, and have you pay a tax based on mileage, because somehow they don't have enough fucking money to pay for the roads. With all the money they're getting, they don't have enough money to pay for the roads. So, but supposedly it's the gas tax. So when you buy gas, that's supposed to pay for the roads. So that has nothing to do with your payroll tax that you pay to whoever. So you work and pay, probably depending on how much money you make, there are some people who don't pay anything and get money back. I think that's kind of crazy. If you don't pay any taxes and you get money back that you never paid in, that doesn't really make sense to me. But you may be paying between, I don't know, 8 and 30% or something. Who knows? And it depends too, because you may have things you can write off. But if you're more like in that middle class area and you don't own a house, you probably don't have anything you can write off. So you might be paying like 20% of what you earn to the government. So 20%, that's a lot of fucking money. I think that's what I ended up paying last year, or at least what they're taking out. And then you get the standard deduction. There's no way I think I paid less than 15. So you think of that 15%, like the mafia again, coming by your store and asking, for protection, except this time they're coming by your work and saying, hey, you got to pay us some of this money that you make here. And it's like, well, why would I fucking do that? Well, first, we're just going to take it out of your check, because we made a deal with the company that you work for, and they have to, if they want to stay in business, give us the money right out of your check. We may give you some money back, but, you're still going to end up paying, like 10, 15% or something of your money. that you worked for. And it's like, well, how does that benefit me? And it's, well, it could benefit you, but it probably won't. And anything that does benefit you, you could actually probably buy privately if the government didn't exist and get a better deal. So what I mean is, like, say, employment insurance, or yeah, that's what it's called. Like, if you lose your job, you know, you get paid, but you don't get paid shit. I think the maximum is like $420 a week or something. So if you make, you know, and you got to pay taxes on that too. So if you make before taxes like a couple thousand a week or more, that's a huge difference. Or if you make that after taxes, that's a huge difference. So what do you do about that? Well, obviously, you just don't have that money and bills don't get paid. But if there were companies that actually sold, and there may be, but I doubt it, but that sold unemployment insurance, and they gave you 100% if you lost your job, and on top of it gave you a better price based on your risk, or gave you the same price but, you know, gave you all your money if you lost your job, then, you know, obviously that would be a lot better. And that's usually what happens when things are done on the private market, because there wouldn't just be one company. There'd be a whole bunch of companies, and then you can go and check out the prices and go to the company that would give you the best deal. Maybe you already have insurance, like maybe your car insurance place also does that kind of insurance. And then you get it from them for even cheaper because they give you a discount for bundling your car insurance and your unemployment insurance. So essentially, from the work side of it, your life is totally controlled. You can't tell your boss to fuck off. You can't just quit. Say you hate your job. You can, but if you have kids, if you have mortgage payments, you can't just quit. You can't just, you know, tell them, fuck you, I hate this job. You're stuck there. Now, you can look for another job, but no matter where you go, you're still in the same situation where they're controlling your destiny. As opposed to if you had your own business and then you have control over your destiny. Now, things can happen that are out of your control, like the economy or natural disasters, or I don't know, things like that. But the way things are set up now, the barriers to entry are getting harder and harder for every type of business. So for something like you want to open your own Walmart, but not a Walmart, you want to open whatever your last name is, because I think they were the Waltons, and you want to use the first three letters in Mart, and try doing that. Now, it's going to cost you so much money because these corporations make deals with the government where after they're already established, they put in more and more regulations, so it's harder for any other businesses to get involved. And that's why something like minimum wage, Walmart really wouldn't give a fuck about hiring minimum wage because it benefits them in the sense that their competition, their existing competition that's still around, maybe they can't afford that much. And maybe they go out of business. That means Walmart would take a bigger market share and they would get even bigger and make more money, even though they're paying more money. So most businesses now, because of all these corporations, unless you're a multimillionaire, your barriers to entry are so hard that most likely you're going to be working for somebody else for the rest of your life. And that's by design. If you go back 50, 60 years ago, I bet you and compare the amount of small businesses or privately owned businesses compared to now, I bet you the difference was huge. It's probably over 100 and something percent less now than it was. And of course, with manufacturing and all that leaving, that made a big difference too. But you used to have people that would work at companies like their whole life, and it was more like a family type thing, as opposed to now where I don't know how many jobs it is, but the average person, might have like 5-6 jobs throughout their lifetime, because it's not what you did for the company last year or last month, or it's what have you done for them lately, and that's what they give a fuck about. And the bottom line is they're, if they're a corporation that's on the stock market, all they care about is their stock price. Is their stock price going up? And, maybe it is, but maybe it has nothing to do with you. And they're like, hey, we don't need them anymore. We'll just get rid of them. So I'm going to take a break. When we come back, I'll talk a little more about this. And then I think there's some articles that I wanted to talk about as well. So if you'd like to comment, and if you're somebody who's listening live, because I know this happens, or maybe not, but if you have thoughts, just call in. If you're sitting there listening, thinking about it, just call in. Don't keep your thoughts to yourself. If it's just a matter of there's nobody listening, then, I totally understand. Or you don't have any thoughts on the subject. But if you have thoughts on something else, if you want to ask me about, anarchy or libertarianism or believing in true freedom and liberty, call in. You can call in at 702-470-7664. Please text first, and then before you call in, let me know your name and what you want to talk about and where you're calling from. And then the Skype name is send a contact request to Nonpartisan Liberty for All. It's all one word, same thing. Just send a request, your name, where you're calling from, and what you want to talk about. Because I do want to hear from the audience. I haven't in a while, so I know there's people listening because I can see the statistics. So, but maybe, you're doing something else and just listening or whatever. But please feel free to call in. I'm not gonna yell at anybody or anything unless you're a troll, meaning people that call in that are just call in to fuck with you or whatever. But if you got an actual call where but even if you disagree, that's fine, as long as you're respectful and have an actual point. So that's fine. I don't mind that. But if people are going to call in and be disrespectful and just be dicks, I'm just going to hang up on them, because that's not what the show's about. What the show is about is promoting these ideas, getting these ideas out there so you can think about them and be exposed to them and hopefully see the truth for what it is, that the government is nothing but a criminal organization that extorts money and pushes things on you without your consent. And where you go from there, who knows? I've talked about my ideas, which is, non-compliance, and I strongly believe in it. How to act on it is a whole nother story. But I think that's the only way that something changes. Besides that, I think we're in a lot of trouble already, but I think we'll be in even more trouble. So we will be right back after this. Again, if you haven't seen the website, please check it out, nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. You can see the pictures of the police putting bruises all over me if you want to see those. You can also get other information on the site, all the places where the archives are, and I have some articles on there too. And I'm going to try to come up with some kind of blog or article type thing where I write something every day, or at least every other day, but I haven't really put that together yet, but that's another goal as well. So again, we'll be right back after this. nonpartisanlibertyforall.com.
We're back with Dan Rather. Dan, on September 20th, 2004, you delivered a public apology for the 60 Minutes two-piece during your evening news broadcast. Let's take a look.
At the time, CBS News and this reporter fully believed the documents were genuine. Tonight, after further investigation, we can no longer vouch for their authenticity. The failure of CBS News to do just that, to properly, fully scrutinize the documents and their source, led to our airing the documents when we should not have done so. It was a mistake. CBS News deeply regrets it. Also, I want to say personally and directly, I'm sorry.
Does your lawsuit belie that?
No, but it puts it in context. First of all, note that this was about the documents, not about the truth of what we reported. And I keep coming back to Larry. This is where the corporation didn't back us up. They knew we were under extreme attack from partisan political elements and deeply ideological people. There were other people who genuinely thought we were wrong in doing it. Where we were vulnerable is that we couldn't demonstrate to everybody's satisfaction the documents what they did. So note in that what we didn't say what the story reports isn't true, because it was true. Now, on the apology, that I played team. I'm accountable for that. And I understand when somebody says, well, wait a minute, the time you apologize. But two things. I played team. I worked at CBS for 44 years. I believed in the tradition, believed in the mystique, believed in the people. And I think for a long time that was justified. And it was said to me, Dan, if you care about the institution, if you care about the people that you work with, and indeed if you care about your own reputation, it's time for us to say something about the documents, and time for us to say sorry, and time for you to say you're sorry. In the end, it was left up to me, and I read it. I think anybody who's worked in a large corporation and had a team leadership responsibility understands those pressures. Now, the other thing is I didn't know then what I know now. A great deal has come out. It became obvious as time went along that what the management, the ownership, the management of the corporation, and the head of the news division, to a degree, wanted to do was make sure that they shifted whatever blame there was going to be for whatever, if anything, had happened, away from themselves and put it on me and some other good people in the news division. And they succeeded in doing it. Some of it they did in secret, talking among themselves. But I understand that the apology, I said it a minute at the time, I mean it now.
Did you write it?
No.
You did not write it?
No. The most of it was written, I think, by the corporation. I don't know who, but most of it was written. I was asked to, Pat, I can remember that in my office, the president of the news division was in fairly late working on it. But we were working together at that time because I thought that we were a team. As it turned out, there was this effort to scapegoat myself and others in the news division. We haven't even talked about this so-called alleged independent commission that investigated it.
You say that
they spent months and they spent tens of millions of dollars.
Was a distinguished lawyer involved in it?
A former Attorney General of the United States, a good friend of the Bushes, and a loyal a Republican, Mr. Thornburg, headed it. It's nothing personal with him. But what this was, and the lawsuit alleges, and I think it can be shown, this was in many ways a fraud. It was a setup. It was designed, it was designed to achieve a certain result so that the corporation would be exonerated.
Are you saying Dick Thornburg, former governor of Pennsylvania, participated in a fraud?
That's what the record shows. And that's what we allege. That's what we allege.
Okay. You allege in your lawsuit.
And I think the record shows that clearly. Why didn't they go? They had tens of millions of dollars and a lot of time, and they said, we didn't even investigate whether the documents were true or not. Now, we now know that an investigator was hired by CBS, what I call a mystery man, who wasn't even mentioned in the report, had looked into it. So what did he say? What did he say to them? We don't know.
Your lawsuit asserts the following about that apology. Quote, despite his own personal feelings that no apology from him was warranted, Mr. Rather had read the apology as instructed. So you were instructed to read that and was written by someone else.
Most of it. No, nearly all of it was written by somebody else. That's correct. And I stand by that.
That must have been a very hard thing for you to do then.
Well,
worst night of your life?
Yes. No.
Career-wise?
No. Career-wise, it was not a comfortable night. I didn't want to apologize. I didn't think we should apologize. But to say I cared enough about CBS News, and it was put to me that way. And later events, later things that have come out, have indicated that this was all designed to put the blame on myself and the members of the team and exonerate the supervisors who had put this program on the air. Larry, I was not even invited to the final screening. Some people have used that against me, saying, gosh, you didn't even go to the final screening. I wasn't told when the final screening of the piece was even being held. In there were two corporate attorneys from the corporation. I think two good people. Two corporate attorneys were in. Andrew Hayward himself, a rare thing for the president of the division to be in. Executive. I didn't know the final screening was taking place. I was called at 5 o'clock and saying, it's a green light. The program is on at 8 Eastern Time. It's a green light. The point here is that they were the ones responsible for putting on the air. I depended on a team of people, that's true, to vet it. Didn't happen. But I do want to get back to higher ground, Larry, that I'm prepared to discuss all of these things in due course of the lawsuit. But the central thing here is you can't have freedom of the press if you're going to have large, big corporations and big government intruding and intimidating in newsrooms. The chilling effect on investigative reporting is going to be something we don't want to see.
We have just a couple. Dan will be back for another segment. Here's our disclaimer for CBS. Dan Rather's lawsuit is against CBS, CBS's former parent company, Viacom, CBS chairman Les Moonves, Viacom CEO Sumner Redstone, and former CBS News President Andrew Hayward. Larry King Live sought comments from all the defendants in this suit. From CBS, there was this response. These complaints are old news. This lawsuit is without merit. When contacted, Mr. Moonves and Mr. Hayward referred us to the official CBS statement. We also sought an official comment from Viacom and its CEO Sumner Redstone. That request was declined.
Sometimes it's hard to understand the concept of censorship when we have so many options for news. There are hundreds of TV stations, newspapers, and radio shows. But the truth is that almost every avenue from which we get our information in the mainstream media is controlled by only 6 corporations that have one specific interest: profit. News censorship is happening every day, but not necessarily from the top down blacking out the stories, but also in the form of self-censorship, framing, backpaging, all to protect the interests of those corporate conglomerates. So who are the big 6 corporations that control nearly everything you see, hear, and read? First, there's Comcast, formerly owned by GE, which controls MSNBC, NBC, and Telemundo. And there's Disney, which owns ABC, the History Channel, and ESPN. Next, Viacom, the parent company of MTV, Paramount, and BET. And CBS, with all its affiliates. And there's News Corp, which owns Fox News, the New York Post, and the Wall Street Journal. And finally, Time Warner, the parent company of CNN, Time, and People magazine, as well as Warner Brothers. So what impact does it have when an agency that's supposed to serve as a watchdog for the powerful becomes a lapdog for the powerful? To break down some of the most egregious cases of censorship and conflicts of interest in the corporate media, BTS producer Manuel Rapalo.
Hi, Abby. How's it going?
Hi, what's going on? So,
Good.
You know, when I think of the top-down censorship, kind of the hand of the corporation blacking out a story, 2 cases come to mind that are the most egregious. The first one was News Corp. Fox News was going to air a story on the bovine growth hormone, BGH, bovine growth hormone, of course, another Monsanto case of censorship where they were invested in Monsanto for advertising, and their boss said no when a team of Fox investigative reporters wanted to cover this story. Monsanto threatened the station, sent them a letter saying there will be dire consequences, this is a direct quote, dire consequences for Fox News if the story is aired, and I wanted to play what happened when they confronted their boss about this.
I said, you know, this is news. This is important. This is stuff people need to know. And I'll never forget, he didn't pause a beat, and he said, we just paid $3 billion for these television stations. We'll tell you what the news is. The news is what we say it is.
So really, I mean, you know, you look at this case, and it's such an egregious case of censorship, and really he's saying, we'll tell you what the news is. The news is whatever we want it to be. The news is whatever our advertisers want it to be.
No, it's not just, when it comes to the media, really, it's not just the parent companies. It's also your corporate sponsors. It's also the people that are putting out the ads. I mean, Monsanto, had this story actually aired, would have probably pulled their advertisement for Roundup, for aspartame, and all those other products that again aren't tested, but advertise all over Fox News. And it's really interesting that you point out this story, because the reporters and that guy that you just played, they actually countersued against Fox under Florida's whistleblower statute. And as it turns out, under Florida law, they lost that lawsuit because turns out it's not illegal to falsify the news. So, I mean, that really should give you an idea of how dangerous this is and how powerful Monsanto is. Like, they've been doing this for...
Yeah, they've been doing this for the past 10 years. Once again, another labeling issue. We're seeing Monsanto censoring stories. You also were researching a story about ABC.
Sure. This is just another one of those examples. Back in 1998, kind of a very clear-cut example. ABC was 2020, they were going to air this story about how Disneyland is actually hiring pedophiles. I mean, it's just a crazy story. You're thinking a theme park for kids, and pedophiles just sounds terrible. They weren't able to pull the story. Why? Because Disney owns ABC. It's very clear cut. You don't want to endanger or make the corporate interests look bad. So, I mean, that's one of those clear-cut stories. But, I mean, it also raises questions. That one's relatively easy, not to downplay pedophiles. But when you look at cases like CNN's running a story about the BP oil spill, the Deepwater Horizon spill, about the cleanup efforts and how, things are getting better. And as soon as the segment's over, you see a commercial come on, and it's BP. And it's BP representatives going, come down to the coast and eat some one-eyed shrimp or whatever they're doing. I mean, there's a problem in there. And it's so obvious. But I think people don't realize it as much as it's in your face.
They don't realize it, but Project Censored, one of the greatest research organizations in the country about censorship in the media, did a study where they found that 118 people only sit on 288 corporate boards that unify kind of this media conglomerate and corporate America. So you have people involved in Kraft Foods, Monsanto, so many different things, defense corporations, the pharmaceutical industry, lobbying together, all sitting on these boards, and it really is such a small amount of people really controlling all these things from the top down.
It's 6
What are some
corporations.
of the most shocking things that you found in terms of just conflicts of interest?
I was looking at this, and when we're looking at conflict of interest, there's 2 things that really need to be pointed out. It's not just corporations. A lot of execs that sit in corporations and you said it in your introduction, they're sitting on, for example, NBC, Citigroup, Exxon, Philip Morris. Their execs sit on board of directors for Philip Morris. That's not okay. CBS has board members sitting in Walmart, General Dynamics. These are drone manufacturers. The execs for CBS are the same guys that are sitting in the board of directors for drone manufacturers?
And I think
how is that okay?
And I think when people think of the corporate media, they're like, oh, well, of course, the corporate media. But really, we're talking about NPR and PBS as well. I mean, NPR was running a story during the BP oil spill featuring a scientist that was talking about how oil was in the Gulf that would bacteria that would eat the oil. It was like, well, this bacteria is just going to clean up the oil itself. We don't have to worry about anything. Turns out later, according to Greg Palast, the scientist interviewed about the story was given $500 million, $500 million
exactly.
From BP. NPR never mentioned this detail, this quaint detail, when they were doing the story. And of course, we saw PBS.
The thing about that, the money that, I mean, we're talking about one guy that received $500 million. That money, that money actually spread out. It was more like a money spill, is what Greg Palast said in that report that he did. So you've got all these universities, all these independent researchers all over the country doing research on oil biology, and they're all being funded by BP.
And PBS aired the drone documentary by Lockheed Martin, pretty much a promo for drones. And, you know, us talking about all this really calls into question. The U.S. State Department issued a warning about restricted press freedom in the rest of the world, meanwhile ignoring that the consolidation of 90% of the U.S. media by 6 corporations. I mean, really, we're ranked 32 in the world in press freedom here.
Exactly, and I know that we had an infographic somewhere. I wonder if we can pull it up. If not, it shows, you know, between 1983 and now, you're gone from this like multitude of media organizations in the country and really narrowing it down to 6. 6 that control nearly everything that we see and watch in this country, everything that we see and watch. And these organizations, they're also making political contributions. So, you know, they're throwing money into both sides of the equation, Democrats and Republicans, and they get back those special connections and inside information, turning talking points into news, essentially.
You are listening to Nonpartisan Liberty for All Radio with your host, Dave Bourne.
And we are back, and I am your host, Dave Bourne, here on Nonpartisan Liberty for All. I do have an article I want to talk about, but before we get to that, I want to talk a little more about the being slaves of the system. And one of the things in that, if you had listened to that last clip that I played, that the amount of something like 188 people are on the boards of all these companies, I think media companies in that case. So it's essentially, you have the, whatever you want to call them, the elite. And then you have the people that work for the elite who are just normal people like police. But at the same time, because of the things they do, are still part of this whole system of slavery. And then, of course, at the bottom is everybody else. But they, because of that, and all of these laws and all of these things, between the governments and the corporations, they essentially control every aspect of your life for the most part. Now, it's not where I think it's going to end up. I don't think right now it's, I said basically every aspect of your life. I don't think it's at this point every little detail and every little aspect of your life yet. But with all the laws, the militarization of the police, all the spying, all of these things, you are essentially, how are you not a slave of these people? Now, again, you have to look at it a little differently than how you would look at traditional slavery, where you have one person just telling another person what to do. But that's what they're doing. It's just more indirectly. They're setting up a system that does that, as opposed to a person that does it. So the system does it in that, well, if you don't do this, the police are going to arrest you. Or if you don't do this, you're not going to be able to live. So, meaning like if you don't have a job or make enough money or, and then of course in the back of your head, you have all these things that they have brainwashed into most people that you need to get a family and have a spouse and kids and all of that at the same time as well. And again, that makes you more controllable. So you look at like any of these movies or TV shows where somebody has kids or a wife or a husband, and they end up in situations where someone wants them to do something. And of course, what do they go to? Well, we'll kill your kids and we'll kill your wife or we'll kill your husband or, all of these things. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't get married or shouldn't have kids or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. But it gives more control, I think, to the powers that be when you have things that you don't want to lose. Because you would do things when it came down to it to stop something bad from happening to them, for example. And I'm just thinking, I've been watching Sons of Anarchy on Netflix, and I actually watched all 7 seasons. It was okay. It was a little different than I thought it would be. I was just looking for a show to watch. And of course, that's what comes up. Oh, well, especially with the government, when they have a witness or somebody that they want to snitch, that, oh, we'll protect your family, we'll put all you in witness protection, and like shit like that comes up. So yes, it's not what I would call traditional slavery. It's not the same thing, but it's indirect slavery, and there's nowhere else to go. Because the whole world has been taken over and conquered by governments. And you could go someplace else, but it's pretty much the same thing. Here, if you tried to fight back, you're probably dead. If not, in jail. And it's essentially through government on the other side is how they control you through laws. So they tell you what you can and cannot do, just like a slave. Now, they give you, again, a bigger area. They make you think that, give you that illusion of freedom, but they pass laws to let you know what you can and cannot do. And these laws, now, if they were just, like I said, if they were just things like you can't kill somebody or you can't steal somebody's property, anything that affects somebody's else's freedom or freedom of their possessions, then I'd be fine with that, because that's really all that there should be. But with all of these other laws and all of these other things, how are you not a slave to the system, where you are being forced, in a sense, because you are? I mean, you can break all these laws and they might not catch you right away, but eventually they probably will. And it would be the same way if you were a slave and tried to do things that you weren't supposed to do and got away with them. So, again, I'm not trying to take away, and I hope nobody thinks this, I'm not trying to take away how bad slavery was, because, of course, it's, it was horrible. So there's no comparison in that sense. But you're still not fully free. You're not truly free. Nobody is. Well, except maybe the people at the top are the only people that are actually free, that are the ones pulling the strings and controlling everything. So if you look at this, it's becoming, even more and more. You look at spying, and now, Obama's just going to make laws on his own, and all of these things. You're becoming more and more controlled, or that's what they're trying to do, or what their goal is there. Is trying to control you more. And then with the help of, as corporations get smaller and smaller, meaning, bigger and bigger in size, but smaller and smaller in who controls them, you look at that as well, where it's like you have a certain amount of plantation owners, which is a small number, and then you have everybody else. And these people might as well just own the country. And you're just slaves within their country, and you don't even know it. At any time, the government can essentially do whatever they want to you. And I know there's still people that don't believe that think, no, this is the United States of America. They can't do that. But they can, and they have. That's the whole thing. It's not a question of can they do this, because they have done it. They've killed people. And that's, the absolute finality there. Now, of course, they're not going to come out and admit that they've done it. Like in the case of Michael Hastings, a reporter for Time magazine, where Rolling Stone, where his car just blew up. The engine just blew out. Just went the way it was described. I think it just blew up and went up into the air and whatever. It was a freak accident. And supposedly he had talked to somebody a couple days before, and saying that the CIA was following him because of a story that he was going to do or something like that. And he was the one who wrote a big story about some of the soldiers in Iraq. So he was driving down the street, and they claimed that he was going like 100 miles an hour and crashed into a tree. But the engine actually had, I don't know what happened to it. It caught on fire and essentially blew up. And he had the type of car, I'm thinking it was not a BMW, but it was some car that would never happen on. So, and he was getting close to something most likely about government. So you look at things like that, and that's not the only time that happened. I mean, they probably would have killed Edward Snowden if they knew what he was going to do. They go after whistleblowers all the time. It's, again, sometimes it's frustrating, and I say that a lot because I sit here and, I try to mix it up as much as possible. And when I say mix it up, talk about different things that are going on, because there's so much that is going on. I have so much to talk about. But I know that some people probably don't take me seriously, or if they do, I don't know what, if anything, that they plan on doing, or if, and I guess when I say plan on doing, I'm not talking about doing anything, illegal or anything like that, but, getting involved somehow. And really, the other frustrating thing is that, like I was saying, there's not that much to do that's going to make a difference. That's what we're looking at. Luckily, at least for now, we still have the internet. How long, I don't know. And when I say that, I mean we still have the freedom that we have of the internet, where I can get on here and say pretty much whatever I want. Not pretty much. I mean, I can say whatever I want. But I mean, if I said something that was, threatening or something like that, or, but I mean, besides that, I can come on here and say whatever I want. But is it still going to be that way a year from now? Because if we lose the internet, and the government's not stupid, they know this, we're in a lot of trouble, because that's where everybody's getting their information. That's how people are communicating. That's our whole platform, really, of getting out the truth. And that's the one thing that I look at, and I'm trying to think of how to explain it, but it's I look at as a positive, as something that we have that they can't take from us, is the truth, because the truth is on our side. And that's why I think the government is so scared, because they know that. They know that the truth is on our side. They know what they're doing. Now, they can justify it any way they want. They may be sitting there and justifying it in their own heads, what they're doing, that they're doing it for, like you watch the movies and you see the bad guy and he says what he's doing, and some of them say that, well, this is what we have to do because it's the only way to whatever. And you have those people that believe, and I think Dick Cheney would be one of those crazy fucks, but that they believe that the only way to make things better or accomplish things or whatever is by doing so. It's kind of like in the people that have seen the second Captain America, and they had what was the name of the Hydra, and that they felt that the only way to make things good was to get rid of all these people that supposedly might in the future become people that are a threat. So they wanted to get rid of them now, and they could obviously justify that in their head by saying, well, you know, we're just killing the threats. We're just getting rid of the threats. And I don't know what these people think. You know, it'd be interesting to hear what these people or some of these people think about, because they let a lot of this stuff happen or are involved in a lot of this stuff happening. So I don't know, you know, and when I look at the people in the country and think about, you know, how many bad people are there really and how many good people, because it's really a small percentage of actual serious crimes like murder and rape and things like that. The amount of actual crimes of those compared to the amount of people in the population is not a big number percentage wise. You know, yeah, you can look at the US and say, well, you know, this amount of people were killed and whatever, but again, the U.S. is the third biggest country in the world, more than 300 million people. So for that many people, it ends up being a small percentage. But are all those people or the majority of those people in government or in the police force or in all of these jobs that are supposed to be good and are supposed to be there for the good? So it's, in a way, it's hard to, you know, and obviously I don't know, you know, any real politicians. I mean, I talked to, who did I talk to? My county commissioner. That's as far as I've been in talking to politicians. And do I think she's evil? I don't think she's evil, but I believe that she does things that are not good for the community, and she realizes that. And maybe it's well, to do this, I have to do this, and it's the greater good type thing. And that's definitely why I couldn't be a politician, because I couldn't do that. I couldn't say, well, we're just going to let this one go. But, you know, that letting this go will save this. So it's hard to really see. I want to get to this article before we go. I know I was kind of babbling there at the end, so I'm sorry about that. But there's a poll, and this is what I don't get. But there's a poll that says it's a Gallup poll. The number one problem facing Americans today in the U.S. is government. Now, I don't know how many of those people are people that support freedom and how many of them are, look at it because, well, we don't have enough or government doesn't do enough for us, or how they're looking at it. Because I would think the majority of them are looking at it that way compared to, from a level of freedom. But that was the number one answer. And I guess 16%. How did they get 16%? It says, according to the poll, Americans think the government is the largest problem at 16%, followed by the economy at 13%, and then unemployment and immigration, which are tied at 8%. So how does that bring you to 100%? There must be a bunch of things that are like, 2% here, 3% here. So, yeah, so that's, in a way, that's a good thing. Again, not knowing the rationale behind it, because that makes a huge difference. If the reason they're saying that government is the biggest problem is because, again, government doesn't do enough for people, they don't give them enough welfare or something like that, then that would be a problem. But if they're actually looking at it from the standpoint of, well, America is not free enough, the politicians are passing too many laws, they're trying to lie to the people, not doing what they say they're going to do. So I don't know. It's positive. Oh, well, it says here that in the Pew, there's two polls. In the Pew poll, their findings suggested that 57% of voters feel frustrated with the government, while 22% feel angry, 18% feel basically content. Okay. So that one's better because it's actually saying that they feel frustrated and 22% feel angry. And it also found that the majority, around 3 in 4 Americans, actually figured out that the federal government is run by a few big interests who nearly 2/3 say the government is almost always wasteful and inefficient. So here's where you have a huge problem. And this goes back to the whole thing with being slaves, that there was, I think I mentioned another poll earlier this week, or a study that said the government does not match up with what the majority of people want neither. So that, with the fact that there was another study saying that the government was an oligarchy, that when you actually study these were two studies. When you actually study the government, it comes out that it's actually closer to an oligarchy than anything else. So when you look at those in a way, it's positive for, I mean, it's obviously not positive in the sense that, you know, the country's all fucked up, but it's positive to the cause of trying to make things better. But I mean, how many of these people, again, their issue is that they just want to be free to do what they want and choose what they want to do. And we don't know that. So that would make a big difference as well. But it does show that in that first poll that almost 80%, pretty much 80%, because 79% are either angry or frustrated with the government. So how or what do people do? And that's what it comes down to. And how many people are willing to sacrifice something, at least, to stand up to the government. And it doesn't mean you even be sacrificing anything. If you're somebody who's out there protesting, you know, as long as you don't assault anybody, it's not like you're going to get in any trouble or anything like that. And the same with, you know, if people are holding signs or whatever, it just, I don't feel that does anything. And I've talked about this before. I don't think, now, I don't look at people that do it. I don't look down on them or anything like that. I think that if that's what you want to do and that's the best thing for you and it's something that you like to do, then I think that's what you should do. I think it does make a difference when cars drive by and people see that you're out there holding signs and things like that. And the other thing is, you know, if the news picks it up, and this is what I've talked about before, which they never seem to pick it up when it has to do with anything related to freedom and liberty. But if the news actually picked it up, then that's a real positive, because what happens is that's where people hear about it more, you know, but people driving by doesn't hurt neither. And they may join your protest or try to find out more information or whatever because they drove by and saw, look at these people, you know, doing this. So again, it's not my choice of what I would do, but it is something that I respect people for and don't think that they should stop if that's what you're doing. But what's going to happen, I think, is, you know, you look at this poll and it being number one, is it's going to stay there. And things are going to get worse and worse. And that's where, and this is what I kind of been asking, and I did a show on this, is when are people going to say, I fucking had enough, and do something about it? And is it going to be too late at that point? And that's what is scary there, because when the government is able to get away with all the things they're able to get away with now, all they have to do is just increase that a little. And, you know, you could, the whole thing about people in camps and re-education camps, I mean, pretty much, what do you think jail is? I mean, we have all these things already. They already exist. It's just a matter of maybe building another jail or something like that, and at some point they can, just arrest everybody. It's like, it depends where you're at. Like the people in New Hampshire, they're lucky at least that they have people to watch their back, and that if something goes out, they, or happens, they have radios and they can all get together. But they're not all in the same town. That will make a difference, and it's, a small place up there. Now, in a way, that's positive because the local police is small, but if you get, the state police, I'm sure they're big in New Hampshire as well. So, I don't know. There's just so many times when I sit here and, think about things and I'm just like, I don't know. Like I said, I think the answer is non-compliance. I think we need to all get together. All the people that believe in true freedom and liberty need to get together and just not comply with the laws that don't mean anything. The laws that are there just to control people and to essentially, get them to obey, that are there purposely to keep people in line and to keep them to obey, not, murder and stealing from people and stuff like that, but all the other stuff, all the stuff that try to stop you, truly stop you from being free. And the real issue is just how to do that. How do we get, people together to believe that? And then everybody has their own ideas. And some people think, hey, everything has to be peaceful. Everything has to be nonviolent. I don't believe in violence. I don't think you should be, attacking anybody or going after anybody. However, I do believe in self-defense. And to me, self-defense is not violence. I mean, technically, I guess you could say it is, but it's not. And I don't think there's any other way. And I'm not talking about, again, I'm not talking about a war or attacking people or anything like that. I'm talking about just living your life and being able to be free. And then if you're harassed or someone's trying to take you to jail for something that they have no right to take you to jail for, or they're trying to smash in your window to pull you out of your car, then I think you have the right to do something about that, to defend yourself, and to let them know and even explain why. But again, I think, most of the police are just going to shoot first instead of listening to you like, look, you have no right to do this. And if you continue, I'm going to defend myself. And they'd probably be happy. They'd probably be like, yeah, go ahead. Because no matter what, someone's going to shoot you. And they're not going to tell the truth about what happened. They're not going to say, oh, well, they did whatever to you and you were just trying to defend yourself. And that's what happened. And that's, definitely a problem as well. So that's about all we have for tonight. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. Unfortunately, I don't think tonight was one of the best shows, but we're usually a lot better. So please, if this is your first time listening, Don't judge us on this show alone. We have plenty of shows out there. You can go to Spreaker.com and hear all the archives. Every show we ever did is out there if you want to listen. So, but definitely check us out on nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. And you can also check us out on Facebook as well, as I'm trying to find my, oh, there it is. So we will be back on Tuesday. I may do a show tomorrow. I'm thinking about possibly doing a special for tomorrow. So, but I'm not sure yet. So if not, we will be back on Tuesday. So thanks again, everybody.
You need to realize that when we tell you to do something, do it. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, then the courts will figure it out.
We don't get to take the law, we enforce it. But at the end of the day, each and every member should go home safe. Sometimes the use of force